What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Live Before Lock show presented by Prize Picks. I'm Dave Loughran on Twitter at Lafayette_D, joined by Greg Ehrenberg, reunited once again. Hit the man up on Twitter at Ehrenberg DFS, breaking down a one-gamer. Game 5 of the Bucks Atlanta Hawks. No Trae Young, no Giannis Antetokounmpo. This isn't what I would have expected coming into Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals, Greg.
No, although maybe at this point it is what we should expect, because
right?
it's just been ridiculous with the injuries, to the point where also, I've been going back and forth with a lot of people on Twitter over the last couple of days where people are saying, like the Suns getting to this point, winning, that people are trying to put asterisks next to it, discount it, saying they're not any good, which, listen, certainly they've benefited from good luck, But at the same time, too, Chris Paul missed a couple of games with COVID. Apparently, he has torn ligaments in his finger that he's been playing through for the entire Clippers series. Devin Booker broke his nose because Patrick Beverley's a clown. And, they've had, and also Chris Paul, the shoulder issue before then. So they've had their, bad stretch of injuries as well. It's kind of been unavoidable. Number one, due to just bad luck. But then number two, which is the condensed season and so many teams playing back to back and just players' bodies taking a beating, that's also contributed to injuries.
I said it this morning with Josh. We had talked about this at length. I take nothing away from Phoenix because you can't choose who you play. But, and Chris Paul missed some games. I also mentioned that. But, you can't act like not facing Anthony Davis in the first round and not facing Kawhi Leonard in the third round and then facing a Denver team without Jamal Murray isn't, pretty fortuitous. No,
I agree that it's definitely lucky. But at the same time, too, I think people act like there's no injury risk with Kawhi Leonard or Anthony Davis. It's part of who they are as players, sure, and it's baked into their value. If you're just assuming that Anthony Davis is going to be healthy throughout the playoffs, it's a misunderstanding of who he is as a player. Same with Kawhi Leonard. It doesn't mean you assume they get hurt, but I think that when teams look at the futures odds of some of these teams, and it was something actually I didn't mean for this to happen, and the timing came out kind of poorly, but I had said during the Bucks-Nets series that I thought the Nets were being overvalued in the series just because there was no injury risk being accounted for. And just because James Harden was potentially coming back, it didn't mean another player could have got injured. And then Kyrie got hurt 5 minutes later. And then people go, oh, look how lucky the Bucks are. But at the same time, too, it should have been something that was somewhat predictable. The odds of the Nets staying healthy, all three of their stars throughout the playoffs, given what their health situation looked like in the regular season, and then also given the injury histories of guys like Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, it was not very likely that they were going to stay healthy throughout a playoff run.
Yeah, you buy into that injury history stuff. I know you do. And with Anthony Davis, I think it's totally legitimate with Kawhi. James, and don't worry, everybody. We're going to jump straight into this. We got plenty of time today. Still an hour and 10 minutes to cover one game. So indulge us. Let us know your opinions as well. With James Harden, he's not a constant injury risk. Kyrie Irving's absences for the large stretch of the season were mostly just, the fact that he wasn't playing because he was busy doing other stuff. So I don't know.
But it's not like he hasn't been hurt in other seasons. When is the last time that Kyrie Irving played an entire season without suffering an injury at some point?
Who, Kyrie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
Doesn't the assumption have to be at some point it's fairly likely he gets hurt? It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee he gets hurt. It's not a guarantee he gets healthy. But I think a lot of people look at the games and assume good health for every team when it should be baked in the line that certain teams come with more injury risk than other teams.
So you'd have baked it into the line for the Sixers as well with Embiid?
Yes, definitely. And actually, once Embiid was ruled in for the first game of the Hawks series, I went very hard on the 76ers because I assumed that, that must mean Joel Embiid is, pretty healthy. And I got my ass kicked on that series. Now, I think that some of the second half struggles of Joel Embiid could have been attributed to him not being, totally healthy. And that could have been something that I definitely overlooked a little bit. But yeah, I definitely think that there are teams that carry more injury risk than other teams. And it's just something that people do not consider. And then when an injury happens, people are like, oh my God, I can't believe that somebody got hurt. But I don't understand how people could look at some of these things in the postseason and think there was no injury risk with Anthony Davis or Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, that's fair. Quite frankly, I don't know who hasn't gotten their ass kicked betting the Hawks this season or betting against them outside of Hawks fans. That's been tough. I know Ben and I have talked about it. Even back to the Knicks with a 4-1 win and then beating the Sixers. Dude, I tell you what, I even lost a decent amount of live bets on the Sixers in those series as well. It was, it's been tough. And then this one too, I know Ben beat a closing line on one of his books by 4 points because he got there before they moved it. They just decided not to take it off after the Trae Young news and still didn't cover. This Hawks team has been real tough to figure out this year, Greg.
Well, the other thing too is, who would have known that Giannis, as much as I talk about, that there are certain players that come with more injury risk than other players, who would have thought that Giannis was going to get hurt in the third quarter of that game? Now,
sure, but they still won outright in blowout fashion and were up by double digits when Giannis went out.
Yeah, and I also thought the Hawks were a really good live betting opportunity in that game just because I thought they were being so undervalued by the books. Even once the game started, they were pretty thoroughly outplaying Milwaukee. And we got into the second half of that game. There was a point where the Bucks were up. It was like 12 points. The Hawks were up like 12 points on the Bucks in the third quarter. And the Hawks were still underdogs on the live line at that point. So, I do think that that's generally the type of thing where I think, a lot of the public will just look at big favorites that are trailing in the third quarter, and it's then a pick 'em line. And I think that in that situation, I think that the regular common bettor just goes to, the Bucks in that situation.
For sure. I mean, if that's the case though, like I don't see much value on betting the Bucks as a favorite still, down by 12 or whatever, but I totally get what you're saying. And I'm sure people did. I remember earlier this year, the Thunder were up by 27 in the second quarter on the Lakers, and they were still 3-point dogs on the game. So it happens. There's no doubt about it. And I believe they lost that game too.
In overtime. It was
in overtime.
It was a game,
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. They went to overtime twice against the Lakers in like 3 games.
Yeah. There was no Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that game. There was no Lou Dort that game. I think Al Horford was resting too. That's off the top of my head. So I could have some of the names wrong, but it was something like that.
All right. So what about tonight then? The Hawks went from 2-point dogs on the road to 4-point dogs with this Trey news. It's back up on the board. Pretty much every book I've looked at thus far, it's back up. Yeah, now it's 4.5. So that's interesting. I hit the Bucks earlier this morning. So I'll beat the closing line there. Getting a little lucky with Trey, but I had him to win this anyway. Where do you see this one going?
I think 4.5 at this point, it's an efficient line. I agree that the time to really bet this game was when the Trey Young news was coming out. And it would have been a case where, hey, if Trey Young is ruled in, you bet the Hawks. If Trey Young is out, you bet the Bucks, because the line was in between. And no matter what happened there, it was going to move a couple points in either side. One thing that we talked about before the show started is that one thing that books were really, really slow to change. And I don't know if it's up yet. The series lines, the Bucks. Oh, here we have it now. The Bucks are right now minus 136.
Yeah, that's where they were before they took it off. So I don't know why they took it back off.
But that's at least the book that I betted at. They were lower than that. They were at minus. It was I forget the line I'd said before. It was either like minus 115 or 120, and then they took it down and they put it back up at an elevated number. But I don't mind the current Bucks number. The other one from like 30 minutes ago is a little bit better. But as of right now, where the value stands, I think that's what makes the most sense, is take the Bucks outright to win the series. I don't really know when Giannis is coming back. We don't know when Trey's coming back either. And at least as it stands now, the Bucks are, fairly decent sized favorites in this game. We consider based on the money line here, they win over 60% of the time. So, consider that, and that it's close to a pick 'em in terms of the series line. I think that's the better bet.
4.5, 213 total. It dropped a couple points. I think it opened around 215. Let's dive into it. First off, recapping this series. I want to hit on what we saw last game, because that's more important than anything else at this point. And I think you make a good point in the live betting too, because when Lou Williams is just red hot like he was, he's the type of player that if he's playing that well, that's certainly not really accounted for. Like Lou Williams he only shot 9 times. He only got 9 shots up. He was 5 of 6 from the stripe, but he had 21 points. Just a wildly efficient game from Lou Williams. Bogdanovic, for the first time in what feels like all postseason, or at least over his last 10 or so games, looked good. Look, he wasn't phenomenal shooting, but he was playing well. 4 swipes, 5 dimes, and 3 boards. They just outplayed the Bucks. And one of the biggest things too is, if we're looking back on this game and wondering how this could have happened, forget about Giannis even, because the Bucks weren't playing particularly good basketball to begin with. Chris Middleton was 0 for 7 from 3, Greg. Drew Holiday was 6 of 17 from the field. They did not shoot well. Their big guys didn't show up, while the fill-in, the spot starter Lou Williams and everybody else on this Hawks team came to play. That's really what it came down to. The Milwaukee Bucks just shot like shit.
And I do wonder, it's hard to really know the mindset of players or what they're really thinking in the game. But I did get the sense that they kind of felt this was going to be a walkover game. They thought they could just show up and they were just going to win by the fact of Trey Young not being in there. And even if I had to point to some evidence of it, Giannis was rarely getting to the rim in that game. Like, he looked like he was playing really reserved. It was kind of like he was saving himself for either the second half or a future game. I really think they thought that it was just an auto win for them once Trey Young was out. And I don't think they played with a whole lot of intensity, whereas the Hawks played like a team that absolutely had to win last game. That was at least my read on it. It's narrative based. There's no way to really prove it. But based on just what I saw with my eyes, that was what I felt like really went down in the first half of that game. And then as the Bucks kind of started to claw back into it, Giannis got hurt and then it didn't matter.
Don't you kind of feel though, like this team goes as Chris Middleton goes sometimes? I mean, I really think we talk so much about Giannis, obviously, but when Chris Middleton is shooting miserably, you usually don't see them have very much success. When Chris Middleton's playing well, the Bucks usually win games and win by a decent amount. Maybe that's just, I don't know. Maybe that's anecdotal, but it sure feels that way. And I mean, tonight you're going to need a big game from Chris Middleton. It's that simple. You're going to need a big game from Middleton, a big game from Drew, unless you're getting just like a huge Brook Lopez game or Bobby Portis off the bench, or Bryn Forbes does what he did back. I don't even know if that was the Nets or Miami at this point, but like you need big games from both of those guys if you're going to win tonight.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, especially because Giannis is out and there's so many minutes and there's so much usage to fill. In a weird way, though, when you brought up the Chris Middleton thing, I think Chris Middleton, the reason that he really gets highlighted and looks, really important in games where even when Giannis is in, is because Chris Middleton's shooting really opens up the entire offense. If Chris Middleton just isn't making shots, then teams could just really load up the paint on Giannis. And then obviously we know when Giannis is shooting, that generally doesn't go well for the Bucks. So if they're just able to build a wall in the paint and shut down Giannis in that way, and then if he's kicking out to Chris Middleton, Middleton's just not making those shots, the Bucks offense does kind of seem to fall apart. And I think there is merit to what you're saying based on that.
And he's going to need to do it today. I mean, listen, I still like him. I have some over props on Middleton today. Much earlier in the morning, and Josh had kind of been in line with that one as well when we talked on the strategy show Monday through Sunday, 10 a.m. Check him out. Actually, might not be every day now that we have only one series left, but every day we have a game, we'll be there 10 a.m. And by the way, what's up, everybody? I forgot to even say this at the beginning. How dare I do such a thing? We're already up over 100 likes, so I appreciate you for taking that initiative. But if you haven't done so yet, it helps us greatly. Let's push that up over 200. We're up over 1,000 viewing right now, 10 minutes into the show. So much appreciated to all of you guys tuning in with us every single day, and subscribe to the channel. Help us get to that 60K mark. Yeah, I'm doing it again. And if you want to join the team here at Awesemo in the YouTube chats, you see the custom emojis and the badges and all of that great stuff. It's right down there. Hit that join button if you want to join. If you don't, no worries. But we'll always give you priority to questions and shout outs and stuff like that because, well, that's the right thing to do. All right, so let's jump into this a little bit more and get into the strategy of all of this. We'll talk players, very specific players. But when you look at tonight's slate, you have the two highest priced players, both ruled out. So then it comes down to Middleton and Drew Holiday. And then you get into Capela is playing. That would have been interesting if he was out. But like Harter right now is really one of the highest priced players on this slate. It's remarkable. Is there anything just wildly different that you're doing tonight in tournaments, or are you kind of staying even keel and just making lineups that are, how do I say, like, are you staying even keel, or is there going to be any players that you're going to go off the map with?
I wouldn't say off the map, because I mean, what crazy guys there really to play? If you look at the ownership projections, especially because there's not going to be that many guys that see the court in this game. If you're playing like Chris Dunn or Jeff Teague, like that would be really off the board, but I don't think those guys are particularly good plays either. I think the most reasonable crazy play you can make is Cam Reddish, just because we have seen him get some extended minutes in recent games. He's only projected for 11% ownership right now on DraftKings. But to me, the most reasonable strategy to differentiate a little bit today is just leave a bunch of salary on the table. Like you look at our projections and some of the guys that are projected really well, that includes Brook Lopez, Lou Williams, Clint Capela. You could very reasonably make a high upside lineup that leaves a couple $1,000s in salary on the table. Like I know for me personally, Lou Williams and John Collins, I think they're very similar projection-wise. I think Lou Williams and Kevin Harter even are very similar projection-wise. So with that in mind, I think that is the most reasonable way to differentiate on the slate is you leave a lot of salary on the table. And I don't think there's much opportunity cost for this particular slate, relative to some of the other ones we've seen.
What about the fact that we've got Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday? We just had an update on our projections. And if you want to check out some free content over at Awesemo, we've got that today as well. NBA player rankings are usually behind paywall. They're free today. Go check them out if you're not a premium sub. what about differentiating at the captain spot? Now, I know it's tough because like Middleton and Holiday are obviously by far and away the best captains, but they're making up almost 60% of ownership at captain tonight on DraftKings. On FanDuel, it's a different story, right? Because you're not paying 1.5 salary for him. You're not getting 1.5 times of fantasy points. You're just looking for the raw scoring up there, and that makes things a little bit more difficult. 75% combined ownership at the MVP spot for them. But what about on DraftKings where they're getting 60% and there might be some other options getting single-digit captain ownership?
Yeah, I actually think the ownership on Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday is pretty reasonable. Actually, I think if anything, it's too low. Just given the way that this slate shakes up, I think that the most reasonable way, like I said before, to differentiate on this slate is you just leave a bunch of salary on the table. Yeah. And part of the issue too is even you could roster Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday in the captain spot, and you still kind of inevitably leaving salary on the table. So to me, I don't really think it's all that likely that Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday aren't one of the top scoring players in the game. But just given the way the DraftKings pricing is, I think that the only way they wouldn't be is if they get outscored by somebody like Bogdanovic or Lou Williams from a raw points perspective. And I don't really think that's super likely.
Have you crunched lineups yet?
Yes.
Okay. 150. Yeah. Are you playing 150?
I am not, but I have, okay. I've built lineups.
So what I was going to say is how many of those lineups that you've made don't have Middleton or Drew at the captain spot?
Let's see. Not very many.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, actually, in the build that I have with my projections, all of them have Middleton and Drew Holiday. The reason being, I have both these guys project for significantly more fantasy points than everybody else in the game. I have, for me personally, I have Drew Holiday as the top scorer. I have Chris Middleton just behind him. And then Clint Capela's next, but there's a 15 fantasy point gap between him and Middleton. So, with that in mind, it's just not very likely to me that there's somebody outside of Holiday or Middleton that's the top scorer for just raw fantasy points.
Boom, 200 likes. Thank you guys. That was quick work. I think we've got to get to the Giannis news here because last game he played and then departed early after what was a pretty nasty looking injury. That was, we had no idea what it was. There's no structural damage. So that's a good thing. But now you come into this one and you've got Giannis who played less than half of the third quarter, played 24 minutes in that game. It's funny because if you look at the game flow on Popcorn Machine, they were down, but then the moment he left, it just, the game flow just goes like this. I mean, straight down. And it stayed there the whole time, like bottom of the ocean type shit right there. And it's no surprise, but Middleton didn't play well. Holiday didn't play particularly well. And Bobby Portis ended up playing a decent amount in that second half, which is really interesting to me. He played around 12 minutes and then came out as Budenholzer emptied the bench, full emptying of the bench for the last 4.5 minutes. I'm talking like Bryant and Giannis Antetokounmpo, Sam Merrill, Noora, and Diakite, we'll go with that. Like, if we're talking about how this influences this game from the start and not just with Giannis going down midway through the third quarter, who do you think benefits most other than Holiday and Middleton, obviously?
Yeah. Bobby Portis. For one, I expect Portis to start today. I haven't seen an official starting lineup yet. And I'm just double checking the news god and the news here. Yeah, no official starting lineup yet. But we saw Bobby Portis make a handful of starts in the regular season when Giannis was out. Off the top of my head, I think there were 7 of them. So 7 starts in the regular season for Bobby Portis in place of Giannis. In those 7 starts, he played 29.5 minutes per game and averaged 36.36 DraftKings points. Bobby Portis is a very good points minute fantasy producer, well over a fantasy point per minute. And I think there's a pretty good chance he played somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes today. That's what I gave him today.
Me too.
And that makes him the best value play on the entire slate.
I don't see any way around it. Like, another thing too is who gets the backup 5 minutes behind Brook Lopez?
Still probably Portis.
I would think it's still Portis as well. Right. And then you can run a smaller lineup outside of that. I have a prop for Portis that we'll get to too once we get to the top prop segment that I think is pretty juicy, especially if you're giving him additional minutes. I mentioned this morning as well. I could see Booker playing quite a bit of minutes. Now, 30 minutes you have, Matt? I have him a little bit lower than that. I'm around 27, but at the same time, 27 minutes from Bobby Portis, who's like a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy in the regular season, is still really nice. I don't know how much it really makes me like a lot of these other guys. And that's kind of the big thing here. Like Pat Connaughton, does he see extra minutes? It's possible. Does Brook Lopez see extra minutes? Yeah, I think that's possible, but you're still voiding, Greg. You're still voiding 40 minutes from Giannis. Like that, even if a couple of the starters get a few additional minutes, even if Brook Lopez gets some extra minutes, there's still a lot of minutes to go around there. That's 40 minutes is a heck of a lot of minutes to soak up if you're already someone getting decent run in the rotation.
Yeah, so I think also don't forget, we've seen a game where the Bucks played a game 5 against the Nets where it was tied 2-2. Obviously, there was no Giannis in that game, but we could go back to that game 5 against the Nets and look at some of the minutes that Budenholzer was willing to play as starters. And you kind of get a sense that, oh, these guys are going to play really, really big minutes. So in that game, Chris Middleton played 45 minutes. Giannis played 42 minutes. I don't think it's crazy to think that Middleton and Drew Holiday both play like 44 to 46 minutes today.
Absolutely.
And I didn't project them for that, because if you do, then it's just you're expecting like 50 plus fantasy points for both of them. I mean, not that actually that would totally matter, because I still think the two best plays that should wind up in the majority of every lineup anyway. But yeah, I mean, even giving them 40 minutes, they're still easily the top 2 fantasy producers on the slate. But yeah, talking about covering those minutes for Giannis, I think that Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton both play almost the entire game, and that's where at least a handful of those minutes go to.
Yeah. Do you think it helps Brook Lopez tonight? Like, do you think additional run goes to him? I would assume it does, especially if Bobby Portis is expected to get those backup center minutes.
Yeah, and then don't forget also is that we have seen Giannis play center minutes in the playoffs and in the regular season, although not quite as much. But yeah, the Bucks play smaller lineups where sometimes Brook Lopez isn't on the court, and that happened in game 1 of this series. I thought Brook Lopez was going to really be marginalized in this series, because game 1, Lopez played 20 minutes, and you just started thinking like, oh, wow, they're going really small against the Hawks in the series. Lopez's minutes have since bounced back. He played 29 minutes last game, 25 the game before, but also keep in mind that last game was a blowout. So yeah, I think that Brook Lopez should play the most minutes he's played in any game so far this series. I think he probably plays north of 30. And, if you look at his numbers this year, when Giannis is off the court, Brook Lopez does see a little bit of a bump in his stats, 2.1% increase in usage, scores an additional 1.41 fantasy points per 36 minutes. So yeah, I think this is a better spot for Brook Lopez for sure.
If Josh was in chat right now, I would ask him to create a poll for us. Jordan, are you logged into the Awesemo account? You know how to create these polls? All right. Totally leaving the reservation here, Greg, but that's what I'm best at. I'm reading chat and I'm seeing a litany of comments about CP3 or Damian Lillard. Who's better? Who would you rather have? Snap answer. Don't think about it right now. Who would you rather have on your team, Damian Lillard or Chris Paul, in the current iteration of them?
So is this in terms of who's better, or who do I just like more?
Oh, no. I don't care who you like. Like
Okay.
You're building a team, and I like Dame more, but I like them both. I'm a big Dame guy. But you're building a team and you're starting it with one of these players.
Yeah, so it's Damian Lillard, but if we're going peak player, Chris Paul's peak was better than Damian Lillard's peak, and Chris Paul should have won an MVP also.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, but I'm talking their current versions right now.
Yeah, it's Dame right now. For the career, it's Chris Paul.
I agree. And chat is definitely chat is backing that up. We got 120 votes right now, 75 to 25. Damian Lillard. Yeah, I mean, I'd take Dame all day in this spot, but everyone knows that. I'm a Damian Lillard stan when it comes to Twitter and everything like that.
Yeah, I think where it gets more interesting, though, is if we talk about over their careers, like I think it's pretty clearly Chris Paul, but I think a lot of people would go with Dame just based on recency bias. That and people don't actually like Chris Paul. There's a lot of people who just find Chris Paul annoying or don't like him. I'm a Chris Paul mark. I bet the Suns in the offseason to win the championship when they traded for Chris Paul. I think that he's massively valuable, and his defense gets underrated because it's something the public, doesn't really care about all that much. But yeah, for right now in 2021, it's Damian Lillard.
I think if you're comparing careers, though, it's a bit of an unfair comparison because Chris Paul's been in the league for like 7 more years than Dame. So he's had a little bit more time to compile those numbers in those big seasons where This is his first year going to the finals. That's all. He kind of disappointing seasons from the Clippers many, many years, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And a lot of that also was because of something that I think me personally, I knock against him. He had durability issues. And if we're going to say something, at least in favor of Chris Paul at this point in his career, don't forget, we aren't that far removed from the general consensus being on Chris Paul. People thought that was a really bad contract he was on. What he really changed is he changed his workout regimen. He changed his diet. He's gone totally vegan. He said that it totally changed the health of his knees. He said the reason he's been able to extend his career and play this well is because he went vegan, and it totally changed the amount of inflammation he has in his body. So, he made lifestyle changes that enabled him to play deeper into his career. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the overall accolades that Chris Paul has racked up in his career, it's stuff that I highly doubt that Damian Lillard's ever going to touch. He has made 10 All-NBA teams, 7 All-NBA first-team defense, 2-time NBA All-Defensive team. There's no chance that Damian Lillard ever makes an All-Defense team.
Oh, well, no, of course not. And for the record, I'd rather have inflammation.
But also your ability to talk on camera and do your job doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you got a little bit of inflammation. But Chris Paul's probably earned himself an extra, I don't know, $90 million by going vegan or something like that.
Oh, for sure. Listen, I mean, if I'm a professional basketball player, I'm doing what it takes. But as I say, we have a waist up job here. You could not have pants on for all I know and be getting paid, and it wouldn't make a difference. It's pretty incredible, right?
Hey. But with that said, I do like to eat relatively healthy, especially because of
You're vegan?
Yeah, no, I'm not vegan. Although I do eat vegan cheese, which kind of tastes the same to me because I can't eat dairy. But
oh yeah, I was gonna say it's gross.
No, but it tastes the same to me. I can't taste the difference. It's like plant-based cheese.
All right, fair enough. Listen, Justine will get stuff sometimes that I think is going to be disgusting, and it's actually not that bad. Like, is it delicious? No, but if I had to eat it, could I do it? Would I do it? Sure. But vegan's just not for me. I respect anyone who does it, goes the vegetarian route, but man, it's tough. The only reason I do it is because I hate the treatment of those damn animals, man. That bothers me. Really does. I got something about that. I think I like animals more than people, particularly dogs, Greg. Now you know something about me.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you like animals more than Josh Engelman as well.
Well, he is an animal. So, Trae Young news. On the other side of this game, you have one guy in Trae Young who has been the engine of this team for very obvious reasons. I mean, could you say right now that Trae Young, and maybe you'll be on a different page than me. That's fair. That's what makes for good discussion. But can you say that Trae Young in this postseason has surprised you for the better?
Oh, for sure.
Right. Yeah, it has to, right? Like, no doubt about it.
Now, with that said, as good as he's been, I don't think his supporting cast is getting enough credit. And that is something also that we saw last game is when Giannis got hurt. Obviously, that was going to be the lead story, but I kind of thought that because that was such a big headline, it made people overlook how well the rest of the Hawks team played, particularly from a defensive standpoint. And that's one thing. If we look at some of the numbers on the Hawks with Trae Young off the court this year, they are significantly better defense when he's not on the court. Yeah. As much as their offense takes a hit, they allow 5.4 less points per 100 possessions when he's off the court. So that is something that I think we should have expected last game, is the defense to be a lot tighter, also the pace to be slower. So it's not something that I bet, but in hindsight, I wish I would have bet the under on that game. It just made a whole lot of sense. Hawks offense less efficient without Trae Young on the court. The defense is much better, and they also played a slower pace without Trae Young. But yeah, he is a really good supporting cast here. Clint Capela has played well. John Collins has played well. I think he's a little bit overrated because of the highlight plays. Like, there's other guys on the team that I prefer to John Collins. Like, I think Clint Capela is a better player. I think Bogdanovic is a better player than John Collins. But Collins still, he's played very well in the playoffs. Kevin Herter, he's obviously played out of his mind in the playoffs. He hasn't gotten
nearly enough credit for some of these huge games that he won game 7 against the Sixers.
Yeah, he absolutely torched Seth Curry to the point where down the stretch of the game, Doc Rivers wasn't able to keep Seth Curry on the court. He had one of the things that the Sixers had a real issue with was because of on offense, he wasn't able to play Ben Simmons. And then really the second best offensive player on the Sixers down the stretch of that series was Seth Curry. Easily. And he couldn't play Seth Curry on defense because he was getting torched. So, the Hawks were definitely able to exploit the 76ers because of that.
Yeah, no question. That was a big deal. And you're right. The supporting cast has played great, but Trae Young has had some games where, you look at him and you're thinking, All right. You know, if Luka Doncic wasn't going to be a markedly better defender just because of his size, really, then maybe that trade would have made sense. But I don't think the Hawks fans at this point are all that disappointed that they have Trae Young over Doncic, although, you know, I might be.
Yeah.
But,
So, it's funny though, is also because fans get so attached to their players, right?
Of course.
I think if you were to poll Hawks fans and say, would you prefer Trae Young or Luka Doncic? They would say Trae Young at this point, just because they're so attached to him. If you're saying from an outsider point of view and just poll people who are not from Dallas, not from Atlanta, would you rather have Luka Doncic or Trae Young? The poll probably comes up like 75-25 Luka, just because there's going to be some recency bias on Trae Young. A month ago, it would have been like 95-5 in favor of Luka Doncic. But yeah, I mean, I think that trade has ultimately benefited both teams, just because, this is maybe a little bit controversial of a take, but at the end of the day, basketball is an entertainment product. And if you like your team, like, I don't know that you necessarily have to maximize wins to put out the best product possible. I think that a lot of people from Atlanta are just entertained because of how much they like Trae Young. And for that reason, they'd rather have Trae Young than maybe a couple extra wins with Luka Doncic.
Sure. But it's also human psychology, right? Because nobody likes to admit that they were wrong. And I think I think that's tethered to your fandom as well. Like, I can assure you, in Philly, none of us wanted to admit for a long time that Markelle Fultz was a first overall pick bust, right? Like, nobody wanted to admit that. So if you're in Atlanta, Trae Young's awesome, man. He's awesome. But even if this wasn't the case and like Luka was still that guy, people don't want to admit stuff like that either. And then they become attached to him as a result too, because who wants to admit that the team that they love made a mistake? And maybe it isn't a mistake, who knows? But that's besides the point. Trae Young is out tonight. Line moved from 2 to 4, 4.5 in some spots. And now we have a very similar situation as we did last game, except this time, Greg, Lou Williams isn't as cheap. Bogdanovic isn't as cheap. A lot of these guys have seen their price points come up, while someone like Cam Reddish actually saw his salary drop considerably. Clint Capela's salary dropped considerably. But it's kind of all over the place when you're looking at some of these Atlanta salaries.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with this. Is just look at some of the numbers this year with Trae Young off the court. This might seem surprising based on recency bias, but if you go back to the regular season, consider the salaries of these players, and if we recall what these guys were priced at a month and a half ago, it shouldn't be surprising. The best fantasy producer on the Hawks when Trae Young is off the court is Clint Capela, and he is not priced like it on DraftKings. So I personally have Clint Capela projected as the highest scoring player on Atlanta, and I think one of the best ways to differentiate lineups for these single game contests on DK is get more exposure to Clint Capela than guys like Kevin Harter, John Collins, Bogdan Bogdanovic, who are all priced ahead of him. And I have no issue leaving salary on the table to get to Capela in lineups over those guys, because I have Capela project for more fantasy points. We're just based on, the regular season numbers. Don't forget, on FanDuel, there was a point in the regular season, Clint Capela was priced over 10,000 for a stretch of the year because of how well he was playing. So there's definitely, a little bit of concerns with him in terms of he got hit in the face last game. Maybe he isn't totally 100%, but he was such a better per-minute fantasy producer than all these guys in the regular season that I still think he warrants the highest price tag.
All right, you guys hear me out for a second, right? I recently made a video over at our Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. Check it out. If you're in the fantasy football best ball right now, you got some awesome contests going on, huge contests. I've been drafting every day, balls deep in this already, on why Michael Thomas is a great buy low receiver for 2021, right? This guy's a mid-third round ADP right now. I'm going to come full circle with this. This is valuable information. And I got comments like, no way I'm going near him. He sucked last year. Really hurt me. Well, he was hurt. He got suspended. He got hurt again. He had Taysom Hill at quarterback, still had a 33% target share. And Drew Brees retired because his arm turned into a noodle. The point I'm making here, Greg, is that people will look at what happened in the past and ignore all of the circumstances, all of the context. And they'll ignore in fantasy football the fact that he sucked last year, but now I can get him 3 rounds later than he went. It's the same thing with DFS. It's the same thing with someone like Clint Capela today. You don't want to play him at 8,400, and he's burned us at 8,400, but now he's at 6,800. It's a totally different Clint Capela. Erase everything that we've seen. This is the same thing as people being unwilling to touch somebody that's burned them in the past, even though their salary has come down or their situation has changed. And you see it so often.
Yeah, and that's pretty much exactly where I stand. And then even, FanDuel, the price is maybe a little bit more appropriate, but still he's priced lower than Bogdanovic. He's only $500 more expensive than Kevin Harter, $1,000 more than John Collins. And like I said, I have Clint Capela projected for more fantasy points than these guys. And if you look at their per minute production with Trae Young off the court for the regular season, it's not even that close. Clint Capela averaged 1.27 fantasy points per minute without Young on the court in the regular season. The next best mark was John Collins at 1.13. Then DeAndre Hunter, he's out, so he doesn't matter. Then it's Bogdanovic, 1.03. Danilo Gallinari at 0.99. So at least based on the data we've seen over the sample size of the entire season, Clint Capela is by a decent margin the best fantasy producer on the team when Trae Young isn't on the court.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's pretty much what it all boils down to. And by the way, Michael Thomas is going to smash this year. If you're drafting, grab that guy at 27th overall. Thank me later. If Jameis Winston starts, Greg, oh my God, it's going to be incredible. I'm telling you right now.
Even if Taysom Hill does, though, which, I mean, not to get too sidetracked here, but remember when Taysom Hill was a quarterback, he did nothing but throw 8-yard slants to Michael Thomas. There was games where Michael Thomas got targeted like 15, 16 times.
Here.
Yeah.
And one game he only threw 9 times against Denver. So, yeah, I know. It's going to be good. Let's hit on a couple super chats here. I want to get to all of you guys and, of course, all the Awesemo members in Slack. I'm seeing these questions. I didn't forget about you. Everyone with the badge, I got you. And you don't have to have one. If you have a good question, I'll try my best to hit on that as well. Okay, Malcolm Revamp says, is it wrong to put Bogdanovic at captain or MVP on DraftKings and FanDuel cash? Yes.
I'm just scrolling back. Okay, here it is. Yeah.
Well, for cash.
Yeah. Oh, for cash. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's wrong.
For cash, you want to play either Middleton or Drew Holiday. My lean is towards Drew just to have him projected for more fantasy points. If something's close, I'll usually just go with whatever the more ownership is. On DraftKings, though, we have Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton almost the exact same ownership in the captain spot. On FanDuel, Chris Middleton a little more popular in the MVP spot. So, that would be enough for me to maybe consider Middleton there. But personally, I have Drew projected for more fantasy points. That's my lean. But yeah, for cash games, it has to be either Drew Holiday or Chris Middleton.
Yeah. Well, and thanks for the super chat, Malcolm. William, thanks, brother, says, sorry about your Dario Saric yesterday, by the way. I know you were stoked on that. If Bobby Portis starts at the 4, does Collins get a boost not being matched up with PJ Tucker? PJ's been too physical for him, he says.
If Bobby Portis, first of all, Bobby Portis is a horrific defensive player.
Yeah. That's what he's suggesting.
Okay. Okay. Never mind. Does Collins?
He's saying does Collins get a boost? Yeah.
Yeah, marginally, but still, it's not something it's not like a 6-point fantasy swing or anything like that. It's, it's not a thing where it's like, oh my God, Bobby Portis is starting John Collins. Now he goes from me projecting him for 29 fantasy points to like 38 or anything like that. It's a favorable matchup. And then as is, we would expect Collins to do a little bit more when just in general, because Trae Young is out. But still, there's other guys overall in this game that I prefer to John Collins. Not to say that he isn't a viable fantasy option, but I think 50% ownership for him on DraftKings is a little bit too much.
I could be wrong on this, but it sure feels like a lot of Collins points have been flashy alley-oops from Trae Young as well.
Yeah, and actually, let me look at still 1.13 fantasy points per minute when Trae Young is off the court this year. So, we are still seeing a boost in fantasy production for John Collins for the season when Trae Young is off the court. But yeah, I would agree that Trae Young definitely sets up some of the easier looks for him. It's just that Collins' usage rate does go up by a pretty decent margin for the year without Trae Young on the court.
Sure. Yeah, I would imagine efficiency goes down, but that might not really matter. I always relate back to like Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell off the bench in LA. And when one of those guys was out, the other would suffer for sure. One more here. What do we got? Bots Nuts 2K. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for all you do. I think the Luka trade comes down to an even 50-50 split for both parties. And I think it's still 60-40 Luka, maybe a little more, but it's a lot closer now than it was. And Corey Moser, thank you for the super chat as well. All right. Are there any more guys towards the top that are worthwhile today that we want to really plug into lineups? Because it's Holiday and Middleton, obviously. No Trae Young, no Giannis. And then you're looking at guys like Clint Capela. Where do you stand after seeing what we saw last game with Trae Young out? on Harter and on Bogdanovic and on, we'll get to Lou in a minute, but mostly Harter, Bogdanovic, and Collins.
Yeah. So relative to what the field thinks of Harter, I prefer other guys. I have Clint Capela project for more fantasy points than Kevin Harter. I have Bogdanovic project for more fantasy points than Kevin Harter. I have Lou Williams project more fantasy points than Kevin Harter. He's been really good in the playoffs, and maybe he's just a totally different player now. I tend to think that's not the case, though. I think he's had a couple of really good games, but still going forward, I still think Bogdanovic in general is a better fantasy producer. Clint Capela is a better fantasy producer. Remember at the start of the playoffs, Kevin Harter was priced like 4,200, right? And even in games this series, do you remember how many fantasy points he scored in games 1 and 2 of the series?
Oh, Bogdanovic?
No, Harter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm assuming it was on the very low end, wasn't it?
Game 1,
he scored 8 and 12 or something.
Game 1, he scored 17.5 fantasy points. Game 2, he scored 13.5. Obviously, those were games with Trae Young, so you'd expect him to be, a little bit lesser of a player. But even in the last 2 games, it's not like his usage has gone through the roof. He's just hitting a high efficiency of shots. Then his assist rate is really high because the passes he's set up for people, the guys are just making shots like crazy for Atlanta. But the last couple of games, Kevin Harter only has a 13.8% and 19.4% usage rate. Unless he's just going to be a guy who goes out and hits almost all his shots, which I can't assume is going to be the most likely outcome. There's better fantasy producers on the Atlanta Hawks, and, it's almost everybody else who's in the starting lineup is a better points per fantasy producer than Kevin Harter, and he's really expensive.
He had 2 5 fantasy point games against Philly, too.
Yeah, and
it's fantasy points.
Yeah, he had game 3 against Philly. He only played 23 minutes. He scored 5 fantasy points, just had 3 real life points. And then even in a start in game 5, he played 20 minutes. He hit 0 shots and scored 5.5 fantasy points. So, it's kind of weird. I think people are generally so high on Kevin Harter because of some recency bias that we just assume that he's some lights out fantasy player. But, if you look at his last 6 games, he is averaging 31 fantasy points, which isn't a bad mark. But that's less than what Clint Capela averaged for the regular season.
No doubt. And he did have 11 potential assists last game, which is nice. But, 7 assists. I think Kevin Harter, you can expect he has the second highest assist rate when Trae Young's off the floor this year. It's around 22%, behind only Lou Williams. But when you're paying what I would consider a premium for him, that makes it a whole lot more difficult to get there. I don't think there's any question about that. So I'm with you there. How about Brook Lopez? He's the one other guy above that 6K mark today.
Yeah, so Brook Lopez, by the way, if we're also just talking about guys who have project for more fantasy points than Kevin Harter, Brook Lopez is another one. The one thing with Brook Lopez, I do think we were talking about his minutes before. I think he plays over 30 minutes today, but I think Kevin Harter probably still plays more minutes. That's the one thing that I would be a little iffy on with Brook Lopez is I'm not totally sure what his minutes ceiling is. But still, we talked before, Giannis does play a lot of center minutes in the playoffs. Those obviously aren't going to exist anymore. So I think the center minutes are going to be played entirely by Brook Lopez primarily. Bobby Portis is the backup center. And then I think PJ Tucker will also slide and play some of the center minutes. But yeah, Brook Lopez, I do think that he's still a really strong option and somebody who I have project for more fantasy points than John Collins. I have him project for more fantasy points than Kevin Harter. So I don't mind also leaving salary on the table to get to Brook Lopez over some of those guys.
Let's talk about the captain and MVP spot a little more at length. Before we do, though, shout out to our sponsor, Prize Picks. I see so many people talking about them all the time. And I mean this. I always say, like, Prize Picks, I won this, I won that. I've been loving playing a Prize. I'm talking about our YouTube chat specifically. They're offering daily prop, if you haven't heard of them, daily prop-based contests. And they want to help you get started with a solid deposit bonus here. You're not dealing with any sharks, optimizers, or mass entries. To get started, all you have to do, very simple, pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players available on the board to go over or under their projected scores. So you're taking the props just as you would anywhere else. But in this case, you can parlay all 5 of them together and win much bigger prizes. If you correctly pick a 5-player lineup, you can net up to 10x your entry fee. Prize Picks offers games with NBA, MLB, WNBA, NFL, and even esports. And with these different sports, you can take advantage of the mixed sport entry features as well. So you don't have to just put all in one sport. Maybe you're a connoisseur of WNBA and esports. You can mix that up a little bit with the NBA as well. Download it in the App Store or the Google Play Store and make your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. get an instant deposit match up to $100 and an entry into the free $1 million NBA playoff. They got $1 million challenge?
Yeah, so it is.
Wow.
By the way, so I did make a lineup in this to try to figure it out. It's definitely unlikely to hit it. You have to get the exact point totals for I think it's Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Kevin Harter. You have to predict exactly how many points each one of them will score.
Really?
Yeah, but if you do it, it is $1 million and it's free entry.
All right, that's sick. You got any props out there for tonight? By the way, promo code Awesemo, first deposit up the match up to $100.
By the way, also guys, we have the starting line for the Bucks just came out. It is Bobby Portis starting in place of Giannis Antetokounmpo. Guys, no need to put fake starting lineups in the chat. We're going to get the lineup in there. There's no advantage gained by putting a fake lineup in the chat. But that aside, props on Prize Picks. That's what you were asking me, right?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I got distracted by that. So earlier in the day, I did do a Prize Picks video, and also this goes to show some of the advantages to trying to build your lineups early on these sites. The props are significantly different than when I did my video this morning. So Drew, and also the scoring on Prize Picks, if you guys aren't familiar, it's the exact same as FanDuel. So it's, a point for a point, 1.2 points for a rebound, 1.5 for assists, 3 points for defensive stats, -1 for a turnover. So if you're not sure what is a good baseline to look at these stats, you could go to awesemo.com, look at our FanDuel projections, compare them to the totals on Prize Picks, and that's a good way to get a baseline. So Bobby Portis, when I did my video earlier in the day, his over-under for fantasy points was 17. It's now up to 27.5.
Crazy.
I personally still like the over 27.5 for Bobby Portis, but I made a Prize Picks lineup earlier in the day, and I have over 17 for Portis. Some other ones that have changed. Early in the day, Drew Holiday was 42.5. He's now at 46.5. And Chris Middleton was 43.5. He's now up to 48. Chris Middleton, that number looks about fair to me, maybe a little bit on the high end. And Drew Holiday, about fair, but a little bit on the low end. But the ones that stand out the most to me right now, man, these are all really fair.
They do a good job at getting good lines up there as they adjust. You're right. I think you definitely have to hit early. Not always hit early, but if you can, it's a good time to do it.
The one that I actually think is the most undervalued right now is Clint Capela, 31 fantasy points. That's a number that I like going over the top of. If you look at Clint Capela's numbers for the year in terms of Prize Pick points, he scores 1.3 fantasy points per minute with Trae Young off the court. So I know a lot of people right now not very thrilled with Clint Capela and his fantasy prospects based on looking at some of the comments in the YouTube chat. But let's just look at it this way. Clint Capela for the year, 1.31 fantasy points per minute without Trae Young on the court. Let's say that Clint Capela only plays 28 minutes at those kind of rates. That's 36.5 fantasy points. So just based on those numbers, even if you think that Clint Capela maybe gets a nerf for the postseason, maybe you think that his minutes aren't that secure, maybe you have concerns about the eye injury, based on his per minute rates, he has to play like 22 minutes for him to not score more than what his fantasy point projection is there.
Yep. And he was actually going to play 31 minutes last game anyway. So, if that game's even remotely competitive, Clint Capela is not coming out with 3.5 minutes left. It's just not happening.
No, it was, and also he got hurt. So, he got hit in the eye. He had to go to the locker room. There was no reason to bring him back. But yeah, in that game, 28 minutes, scores 27 fantasy points. And overall for the postseason, it's been a little bit lacking, although I don't think he's played in all the best matchups, particularly in the Sixers series. It's something that we talked about before, but that's a brutal matchup for Clint Capela going up against Joel Embiid. So it wasn't really shocking that he struggled in that series, but he has scored as many as 44 fantasy points in this series.
Yeah, he can get it done. Look, I don't blame people for being a little gun shy on him. He hasn't played great, but you have to take the price. You have to take that's an advantage there, getting that salary, coming down about $1,600 over his past couple of games. That's significant enough for me to jump on there. Or actually, sorry, $1,400, but still, that's a big decrease in salary. All right. I know I asked you this earlier, but in tournaments, right? Because people are going to do this anyway, whether you and I talk about it or not. So why not get it out of the way? In tournaments, Who would you say, if you're not going Holiday or Middleton, would be your captains? If I just, metaphorical gun to the head, Greg.
Clint Capela, especially based on the reaction that he's getting in chat right
Sure.
now. Like the more that people tell me somebody sucks that actually doesn't suck, I like them more. Clint Capela, sure, he's definitely underwhelmed the postseason. There's no doubt about that. Clint Capela, though, I remember people getting mad at me because I didn't want to play him at 10,300 on FanDuel 3 months ago. And now he's 6,800 on a single game slate, and people say Capela sucks. It's so much recency bias, and it's also baked into the pricing. But just based on some of the reactions. So currently we have him projected for 8.5% ownership in the captain spot. I would be pretty surprised if it gets that high just based on how people are reacting to Capela right now.
What about Lou Williams?
Yeah, so Lou Williams, I think he is really – the ceiling of Lou Williams is so significant that if you were to tell me who I think is the third most likely player to be the top scorer outside of Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday, I would go to Lou Williams just based on the kind of scoring upside he has, and that I think he's going to constantly have the ball in his hand, massive usage rate without Trae Young on the court. I don't think he's super likely to outscore Middleton or Holiday. And I don't think that Lou Williams is a great captain play, but if I had to pick somebody as a captain outside of Middleton or Holiday, it would be Capela third and Lou Williams fourth.
Yeah, me too. I don't think Lou Williams is crazy there at all. The guy can get hot. Not only going to get hot, but he had in that last game led the team unsurprisingly with 13 potential assists. He's going to be on the floor for a lot of minutes. Now, granted, if he's just playing really awfully and his defense is killing them, you could absolutely see a scenario where he doesn't play as many. But I mean, Lou Will was on pace to play. He was on pace to play almost 40 minutes in that game. Would have been like 38 and a half minutes for Lou Williams. So clearly Nate McMillan is not afraid to run him out there right now. And that's a pretty good feeling.
Do you remember what they do you remember what they traded to get Lou Williams?
I don't.
They traded Rajon Rondo for Lou Williams, and I think it was 2 draft picks they got also.
It was definitely Rondo now that I think about it, for sure.
And I think they got 2 draft picks.
Yeah, and here he is making a huge impact in the Eastern Conference Finals. You absolutely have to love it. At MVP and Pro on FanDuel and Star, are there any things you want to mix up, or is this just cut and dry? Like play the top guys there and then mix it up a little bit at the utility. Right now, if you're building a lineup, you're throwing it in a single entry tournament, right? Larger field single entry tournaments, because most are at this point. Who do you go MVP, Pro, and Star, or Star and Pro?
Yeah, so for me personally, I have Jrue Holiday projected for the most fantasy points in this game. So he would be the MVP option. Chris Middleton then becomes the star play. And then once again, Clint Capela, the way that people are poo-pooing on him, and also just based on my projection for him, he would be my next favorite choice for the star spot. Although I think now that Bobby Portis is confirmed starting, I think there would be a pretty good case to be made for him or Lou Williams in the star spot based on their upsides.
Yeah, I like that for sure. Hey, by the way, 1,600 people watching. Glad to have all of you guys with us. We got about 18 minutes to go. And we're at 329 likes. Not a bad ratio. We're around 20%, but if you haven't done so yet, get us to 400. We got 67 to go to 400. Now we're at 60. I don't have to add. I know you guys will get this done, and I'll thank you in advance for that. Keep on pushing here, putting out some good free content. The best Showdown content. I don't even know if other people are doing Showdown content. I said that yesterday, but we'll take it, Greg. We'll take 1,600 people on a Thursday night at 8:00.
Hey, listen, who doesn't have anything better to do? Lofty and I, right? If we were in here, what are we going to be doing? So nothing. Honestly, there's nothing I would prefer to do than talk about a 1-game Showdown slate. Anyway, if I wasn't here, I'd just be building lineups anyway. Yep.
My answer: taking care of a 4-month-old. So you're a little better off than I am. But
yeah, I'd be playing Mario Golf with Ridden Pack right now if I wasn't on the show.
Yeah, I got to get back into Red Dead Redemption. It's the best game ever, man. And I finished it, and then I started playing it again. Have you played it?
It's not, there are some. I like some open world games, but I don't like I forget is it Activision that makes them?
It's Rockstar.
Okay, of Rockstar. So I don't like. I don't really like Grand Theft Auto that much. I didn't like Saints Row. I don't really like. For whatever reason, just the game, it just bores me, especially going from area to area. It takes so long to get from place to place.
Oh my God. Oh, I can't. When we're not on live before, like when we do a strategy show, we're getting into this for sure because it's all personal preference. I understand that, but dude, those are like the only games I play. Okay. How about this? Would you bump Collins if Porter starts? That was actually, we already talked about that. So that's good. Thanks for the super chat though. Double R. Kyle says, let's talk about Gallinari, Forbes, Connaughton on FanDuel. All right, sure. I mean, if you want to give your quick opinions on those guys on FanDuel, that's fine with me.
All right. So it was
Gallinari, Forbes, and Connaughton.
I think all of them are fairly weak plays. If I had to roster one of them, it would be Gallo, just because he stands to spike a minutes upside. And also Gallo, high variant shooter. If he's making his shots, they're probably going to leave him on the court. And, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that Gallo closes over Bogdanovic, maybe closes over Kevin Harter or something like that. These are situations we've seen play out in the postseason before. I just think it's a fairly low probability outcome. That, and we're not star for value on this slate. Lou Williams is starting. Bobby Portis is starting. These guys are excellent value plays. And realistically, you need Danilo Gallinari, Pat Connaughton, Bryn Forbes. You need them to outscore Lou Williams and or Bobby Portis to be in the optimal lineup. And I just don't think that's very likely.
Our boy Eitan says this is really disappointing, Greg. I agree. Eitan's got a little baby boy in there too, man. He's learning that life real quick. So like 2 weeks old, 1 week old probably.
My favorite of those sandbox games with that kind of setup was the Spider-Man game that came out like 2 years ago. That game was awesome.
Never played it.
Awesome.
My life revolved around playing outside with friends when I was a kid, and as Blitz said, playing GoldenEye. Like GoldenEye quad box on N64 with the boys in the bedroom and the old box TV. That was it back then, man. That was the life.
Is that the game that you logged the most hours in, like pre-age, like 15?
Gotta be, man. Pre-age 15? Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I cruise in USA, Mortal Kombat, the WWE games, hockey, all that stuff. But GoldenEye was like, if you were my age and you didn't play GoldenEye, probably didn't have any friends.
So GoldenEye was one of them for me. However, my group of friends, the games that we played more than GoldenEye were NFL Blitz.
Good game.
And Super Smash Brothers. Those were the games.
Oh yeah, that was great too. That was great too. Yeah, there was just GoldenEye for me was it, man. Like that was the game. Sansoft asked, last piece, DK Cash, this is a super chat. And I would imagine this could help plenty of people. They might be in the same scenario. DraftKings Cash, last piece, Lopez, Bogdanovic, or Collins?
Bogdanovic of those guys, especially for cash.
William says Collins for 10K. We'll split with you guys. Oh, now he's on Collins. Yesterday it was who did I say? I don't even remember at this point. Oh, Dario Saric. And Kyle says, appreciate it, fellas. Have a good night. Throws us a little super chat just for that. You too, man. Good luck to you. Okay. And we'll get to those Slack chat. If you're in Slack chat, premium Slack chat, I got you. Don't worry. I didn't forget about that. Quickly on the rotation breakdown, which I think we've already done. How many minutes? There's a couple of questions to round this out for the rotation that I want to get to now that we have the starting lineups, right? How many minutes do you think Connaughton gets today? Because he's already playing like mid to high 30s in most games. And how many minutes do you have Cam Reddish playing, who played a handful of minutes in his return after a 4-month hiatus, then didn't leave the court, Greg, or didn't leave the bench at all, and then came in and played 23 minutes in game 4. So kind of all over the map on Cam Reddish.
Yeah, so I have 28 minutes for Pat Connaughton. I have 20 minutes for Cam Reddish. Reddish is a weird one because, like you said, the rotation patterns were all over the place. And also, don't forget, he was a DNP coach's decision 2 games ago. And it's not like he wasn't healthy. Yeah, it's not like he wasn't healthy because he played the game before then. Garbage time, played really well, played 17 minutes. And I saw a lot of people saying like, hey, Cam Reddish is going to be in the rotation last game. He played so well, even though it was garbage time in a blowout game. People thought he had earned himself run in the rotation. Then he's a DNP the next game. Then last game he plays 23 minutes. I think there's a really wide range of outcome for his minutes. I gave him 20. I'm not really getting to him all that much just because there isn't that much of a desire or a need to save salary. If this was a spot where I was expecting 20 minutes from him and we had Giannis and or Trae Young as an option, I would have gone to a lot of Reddish because those are guys that I always like to load up on for showdowns. Just, those like 1,500, 1,800 guys that I've projected for, like 12, 13 fantasy points. because those guys come in really handy for slates where the stars go off. But I don't think that's as necessary on this slate.
Yeah, no doubt. I think we hit on most of these punts. So Jordan, move this down, fella, to punts. Other than, I wouldn't consider Portis a punt per se, but I think at that price point, he's still the best value. Lou Williams, still a good value at that price. Who would you say if you were ranking, say, the 2 or 3 best punts? We can probably lump Cam Reddish into that with his salary dropping a lot. Who would you say are your 3 favorite punts tonight on DraftKings?
So what are we defining as a punt? Is it below a certain salary tier?
Yeah. Let's say like Cam Reddish and lower. I think that's reasonable because Cam Reddish is $3,200. So you could even throw Connaughton in there as well if you want, just for argument's sake.
All right. So if it's for argument's sake, it would be Connaughton 1, Reddish 2. There honestly wouldn't be a third one.
Yeah. That's pretty much it.
If you had to take the craziest play that I think, so the craziest play that I think has some merit, if you're playing 150 lineups and you just want to take a chance on somebody, I would actually say Chris Dunn at 1,400. The reason being is, there's a scenario where Lou Williams just gets cooked on defense, and Drew Holiday is lighting him up. The first guy I think goes in that scenario is Chris Dunn to play defense. Chris Dunn is an excellent defensive player. So I don't have Chris Dunn in my player pool. I'm also not playing 150 lineups. If I was, I'd probably have like 5% of Chris Dunn, which isn't saying that much, but if you're going deep today, that would be the guy.
I think on Showdown slates, you have to take some stands like that, especially if you're playing a lot of lineups. He played 11 minutes last game, so it's not like he didn't play at all, right? And he wasn't someone that was getting many minutes outside of blowouts to begin with. I mean, he wasn't in the rotation unless it was a blowout. But is it feasible that Lou Williams doesn't play 38 minutes in this game? Yeah, I absolutely think it is. Now, Chris Dunn closed that out in the blowout, so it was 35 minutes really since Dunn got that blowout run, and only around 8 minutes before the blowout. But yeah, Lou Williams could play 30 minutes here, and Chris Dunn still gets that backup run, and we're looking at an entirely different situation. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think that's a good call for sure. All right, Greg, we got a few topics left. The one that I've been asking Josh when we do the Live Before Lock show is with cash games and tournaments, what's the one biggest difference in your cash game and your tournament lineups tonight?
I would like Clint Capela less, just for ownership reasons, as well as I have him projected. I think more often or not than cash games, you just kind of want to align yourself with the field and the field's opinions. And, for this particular game, I would say that even though we do have Clint Capela projected for, ownership equal to guys like Bogdanovic, Lou Williams, John Collins, just based on what the public sentiment seems to be, I prefer Clint Capela to those guys in tournaments. In cash games, I'd rather get to Clint Capela, Lou Williams, John Collins. I tend to think their ownership is going to be significantly higher in cash games just based on everybody seemingly being sketchy on Capela.
Our favorite props, then the optimal lineup, and we'll wrap this one up. Before we do, I love to shout out all of the viewers here, all the subs at Awesemo with the Awesemo Hall of Fame segment. It is fun. What is it? Very simple. You rock the Awesemo logo no matter where you are, Prize Picks, any of these other sites. You come in first through third in a field of 5,000 or more and tweet at Awesemo HOF. Boom. Free $100 value, full month of Awesemo plus Platinum. It's a wonderful thing. All of the tools included, everything we have that have helped people win a ton of money. All of them created by Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, #1 ranked DFS player out there. Download the avatar at awesemo.com/avatar. Tweet your wins at Awesemo HOF. Tag Greg and myself in them as well and win that free month. Let me run through these and say what's up to our winners from last night. We've got #1 on the board is Beastum 808. Congratulations to you, man. $350 win. Nice little third place finish there. Next up, Hood WOP. That's a nice one. $7,700. First place with, I believe that was just a single game slate, right? Yeah, it certainly looks like it over there on FanDuel. Smoking Cutler. This was the 2-gamer, 10K. Beautiful win, 335 points, thanks to Lou Williams and Bogdanovic, and of course, Marcus Morris and Chris Paul. And then to close this one out, our boy Derek Boo's been watching the show for a while. I know that. Says, thanks to Live Before Lock, made that switch at captain. Thanks, guys. Taking a nice little first place there as well. Congrats to everyone. It's always fun to shout you out, but it's better when you get that free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Download that avatar, tweet that win at Awesemo HOF, and we'll get you taken care of. All right, so top props time, Greg. We got a little bit of time to hit that, and then we'll take all of your questions. Give me your first favorite prop on the slate tonight.
All right, so let me look also to see, because when we first started, Trae Young had just gotten ruled out, and I assume that some of these numbers are going to be much different looking than they were before. So I'm just going to refresh the top props tool and see what we have for the most recent best numbers on the board. And also, by the way, guys, we even used the top props tool that we have on Awesemo.com. Super easy to use, best way to find some of the best value on the board, because just based on the projections we have on the site, it compares them to the betting lines at various books, pulls out the best betting lines, and then gives us an expected ROI on those bets. So right now, the one that we have as the most valuable prop to bet, and it's one that actually I would like in per my projections too for points, is Brook Lopez over 13.5. We talked about him briefly before in terms of what we're going to expect from him with no Giannis on the court. There should be extra minutes going to Brook Lopez. I also think that he should be playing, getting more minutes and usage without Giannis on the court. So Brook Lopez over 13.5 is one that I feel pretty good about.
I dig it. Earlier in the day, I hit these earlier in the day. Drew Holiday over 22.5 points. Chris Middleton over 27.5. Usually I'm not hitting over props on two players for the same teams, but it just felt low. I mean, these are two guys that are going to operate with heavy usage. I think it's at 28.5 and 23.5 now. I still like it. I mean, listen, if they win this game, these guys have to have big games. It's really that simple. These are two spots that I like very much. Kevin Harter was a 3.5 assists earlier. He's at 4.5. I'm kind of ambivalent about that now, but I do have one for you, Greg. It's a plus money bet. This is no, lock at all, but there's one site that, starts with a F and ends with a Ndul, and they've got Bobby Portis plus 186 to hit two or more threes, not more than 2 threes, 2 or more threes. Now consider this. In the regular season, he was a 47% three-point shooter. He already is attempting a decent amount of threes in the postseason, just not hitting a lot of them, but he's a much better shooter than he's been made out to be. There are games where he will just spot up baseline, like corner threes, and they'll just feed him. I think you could see a decent amount of that tonight. And if Bobby Portis ends up playing 28 to 30 minutes, you're going to see far more opportunities for him. Plus 186 to make 2 or more threes for me is a nice bet there. And I think there's pretty decent value on that. You got anything else?
No, I dig that. Bobby Portis for the season averaged 1.1 threes per game in just 20 minutes. And if we think that he's going to play someone in the neighborhood of 30, maybe even gets over that today, that's definitely value at the plus money. If it was, if it was even money or something, I would feel differently about it. But just because of what the odds are, I think that's I think that should be a profitable bet.
I mean, 35% implied odds. I think if Bobby Portis plays 30 minutes, he's doing that more than 35% of the time.
Yeah, totally agree.
Anything else you got, or we want to take questions and call this a night?
3 minutes left. Let's take some questions that people won't have enough time to adjust their lineups for, but it's service to the people anyway.
For sure. And hey, appreciate you guys hanging out every one of these nights. We won't be here tomorrow because the Clippers got knocked off, but it's been awesome, and we'll keep doing this. Obviously, I won't be back on this night show until Monday, so much love to all of you. And if you can hit us up with those 47 likes, pop off to 500, that'd be a great way to close this show out. All right, hang around while we answer these questions. Let's see if we have them in Slack chat. And Greg, if you have any pulled up, feel free to just start hitting on them as well.
There was actually, I just noticed we missed a super chat a little while ago. It was not a massively important one, but William Fields asked, does anybody like the God of War series? Yes, I like those games a lot. I think God of War, I do like hack and slash games. So I guess I put it in kind of the hack and slash open world type. Like, I really like God of War, and I really like the Dark Souls series also.
Fields, I don't know if it's the same Fields, but there's a Fields that's been in our Slack chat for a while. Did you see that same game parlay that he just put $420 on? $501,000 payout.
It wasn't. He found it on Twitter. It's not.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say,
because he did say it's a bet he saw on Twitter, but it is. So this is the DFS site that we play on that has a questionable customer service that starts with an F. So they a same game parlay on their sports book. Brook Lopez to score 20 plus points. Brook Lopez to score 10 plus rebounds. Chris Middleton to record 10 plus rebounds. Drew Holiday 3 plus threes. Drew Holiday 20 plus points. And Chris Middleton 40 plus points. That is $420 to pay out a little over $500K.
It's just absurd. All right. Let's see. Cleveland. Thank you, sir. Yeah, that was the Michael Thomas. Watch the video. Check out Awesemo Fantasy Football. I swear there were more questions in Slack chat. Maybe I'm just missing them. It seems like there's been a lot of conversation in there. So I just missed it. Well, that's all right with me. Happy to take any questions as we close this one out. And another thing too is for those of you guys hanging out with us till the end, Corey John says 0% chance of hitting. It's pretty close to zero. Yeah. We were talking about potentially doing like some, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't spoil it. No, I'm not going to spoil it. I was going to gauge interest. I'm not going to spoil it. I can't. That wasn't intentional. That's not a tease right there. This is dead serious. We're just going to do it and see if you guys enjoy it. And if you do, well, then we'll keep doing it. Final words, Greg, before we head out.
Double R leaving a super chat with 15 seconds left, which this is going to be hard to react to, but he said, biggest fade on FanDuel. To me, I would say Kevin Harter, just based on other guys I've projected around him.
And Ryan Redenbaum says, Laffy, what is Josh's spirit farm animal? Oh, clearly a pig.
Yeah, pig. Cow, maybe.
God, what do you got?
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe a cow. Definitely not anything that's like a performance animal, like a horse. That's for sure.
Oh no, we're talking straight farm. Yeah, he is loud. I don't know. What do you guys? We still got 1,000 left in here. What farm animals, Josh Ingman? He said he was going to be watching today, hoping that never mind. Weasel. I wouldn't call a weasel a farm animal. Don't do that. We're having fun here, Manny. See, that's just cruel. Emac says Josh is a rooster. Thomas Tyler says a cock. I don't know.
I'm trying to think of like an obscure farm animal that'd also be funny, but there aren't really that many. I would just say
there aren't. Marshall says a barn owl. Angela says a giraffe. Certainly not a farm animal.
No. What farms are you going to? If there's giraffes, you're thinking of a zoo.
A llama, a duck. I didn't know ducks were part of a farm.
I don't see Josh as a duck either. He's I'll agree with you. I think pig is the best one, but one that like the butchers don't want. So like there's nothing they could do with it. It just uses resources. Like you can't cut it up for food or whatever, because there's no appeal to anybody who's purchasing. So it's just kind of, it's using space. Like it doesn't really react well to steroids or anything like that. So it can get juicy, but
it likes the smell of its own shit.
Oh yeah. And it eats it too. Like
it's just brutal.
It's like, right. We could end there.
It's been fun, guys. Appreciate you all for hanging out. We'll talk to you. Good luck tonight. Enjoy the game, and we'll catch you back here for the next one. This is Live Before Lock, presented by Prize Picks. Peace.